Here I am taking a brief look at the life of notorious shock rocker Kevin Michael GG Allin, also known as Jesus Christ Allin. The guy who is known for cutting or beating himself up on stage, headbutting women in his audience, or throwing poop around, or drinking it and stuff like that. That GG Allin. Even though I'm far from a super fan of his material, I do know some people who talk about GG Allin quite a lot. In fact, way too much in some cases. One person I know apparently even corresponded with him. And, he talks about him quite a lot. So he's obviously had an impact on people for better or worse. So let's briefly look at his history, shall we? Allin was born on August 29th, 1956 in Lancaster, New Hampshire. Although the name Jesus Christ was actually on his birth certificate due to his strict religious upbringing, his name was later changed by his mother, presumably to avoid controversy and spare the young GG Allin ridicule. Nevertheless, the name Jesus Christ almost fits him in a sick way, as GG would later adopt the persona of a man with a messianic complex. Although, of course, some people debate to what degree it was a persona or an act, or, was he being 100% authentic or real, or the reality might be somewhere in between. At least outwardly, and particularly on daytime talk shows, which put him on to drum up controversy and drive up their ratings, Allin believed that he was the ultimate rock god. Perhaps he never viewed himself as the reincarnation of Jesus, but he did refer to himself in his autobiography, called America's Favorite Son, as Jesus Christ. He called himself that, saying, "I am the second coming of Jesus Christ through aim and constant fire." So that's an example of his more poetic language. Of course, if you want to find out how shocking his lyrics can be, you can look up all kinds of his songs, and you'd have a hard time choosing which one is really the most far out there, because he really went way out of his way to shock people. Allin had a difficult childhood in a small log cabin. He began abusing drugs at an early age, and his father was regularly threatening to shoot and kill GG Allin's mother, his siblings, and presumably himself. GG Allin claims some of his earliest sexual experiences involved sheer depravity of various sorts. Maybe these sexual experiences with his brother and his mother's underwear aren't quite as uncommon as one would think. But what about his claims involving living and dead animals? I don't think most people would have that kind of experience or even claim to have that. But GG says it in his book. Anyway, in addition to experimenting with drugs and other things, GG also got into music, and on more than one occasion, he boasted that had he not been into rock music, he would have simply been a mass murderer or a serial killer, and there's little reason to doubt that. It's also easy to dismiss his musical ability, but GG Allin found his way into and out of a lot of bands, either on vocals, drums, or guitar, and he either did cover songs or, yes, contributed his own frequently depraved anthems. And some people to this day swear these were among the best edgy rock bands out there. To be fair, even I like a few of his tracks, such as You Hate Me and I Hate You. It's actually a catchy song. I mean, definitely one of the catchier ones that I've heard from him. And if I were to recommend you to listen to any of his material, it would be his earlier punk rock kind of stuff. Like that track, for example. It's still sort of a dumb shock rock song, but it doesn't forget that it's, an actual song. And that would be one of my critiques of GG Allin, is plenty of his tracks go on tangents where the shock factor far outweighs musicality or any intelligent aspects. So I also have to be honest here. It's not like all of GG Allin's songs are equally offensive, with many being no more so than other punk rock bands on the market, especially at the time. It's sort of a deep, dark secret nowadays, but even some left leaning punk bands made a point to avoid political correctness, especially back in the heyday of punk rock. So GG Allin was nearly always confrontational. He frequently violated people at his shows, though he defended his antics by noting the crowds always had advance warning of the madness about to unfold. Some speculate his behavior was partly due to his being a heroin addict or an alcoholic or, other drugs, but it's far more likely that he often used violence and depravity due to his anger rather than just a far-flung side effect of his drug addiction or the alcoholism, which are compatible symptoms of his underlying problems. Or I suppose I should say were, because he's no longer alive. Personally, I see GG Allin as a pathetic joke, and think he wasted potential as a more viable musician, getting way too far into the shock rock shtick. Though he was influenced by Alice Cooper in the 1970s, it's almost like his influences barely even matter anymore. When all is said and done, GG was no more real than Alice Cooper out on a golf course. In fact, I fully think he might as well have performed as a professional wrestler in an ultra-violent arena. He became his own circus, peddling lewd lyrics and literal diarrhea. I mean, very strange salesman, I guess you could call him. Selling rock and roll as, bodily excretions and self-harm. Like, that's the apex of rock as a musical form. Fling poop around. I mean, honestly, if I wanted to see poop, I'd just take up dog walking, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, though he considered himself the truest incarnation of rock and roll, and is sometimes beloved by certain fans of punk rock, the conspiracy theorist part of me is tempted to think GG was designed by the government itself to ruin any sort of genuine social change that could have come from punk rock as a social movement by making the whole thing look like a self-destructive farce. Like you can't be an actual rebel unless you're self-mutilating and self-destructive and flinging poop around like, an animal at the zoo. The man embodied punk as self-parody, looking like the ultimate rebel without a cause. And of course, the problem with being one of those is you can't really go anywhere with it. You can only spiral downward, pretty much. And that's exactly what he ultimately did. After the dissolution of his life from a drug overdose, GG has been looked at as sort of a rock and roll god, much like he presented himself, and is sometimes remembered as the scary, all-destructive Godzilla that he presented himself as. However, let's not get too deep into the myth here. Basically, GG Allin was a self-professed criminal scumfuck who performed in a series of rock bands, notable for ritual self-abuse and humiliation. He was active from 1974 to around 1993. Had he lived on, GG Allin might have adopted a new stage name, the washed-up shock rocker who fans exaggeratedly cling to in order to appear edgier than everyone else. Sorry, I hate to insult you people who are fans, but that's true. I'm not bullshitting you here. There's truth to that. It stings. It stings. Just like Gigi's poop would have stung the nostrils. Anyway, he's among the few people who would consider someone peeing on his grave as a compliment. And you also know that that is true. No exaggeration, no lie. In fact, I think they had to remove the headstone. That's sort of a thing that I've read before, because people were peeing and pooping on it, and probably puking and who knows what else. Because, as you all know, that is rock and roll in its purest form.